The year is 2031. High atop the dormant shield of Mauna Kea, the air is thin, brittle, and stripped of the humid breath of the Pacific Ocean far below. At this altitude, the atmosphere no longer serves as a blanket, but rather as a fading veil, a translucent barrier between the frantic concerns of a terrestrial species and the indifferent majesty of the abyss. Inside the darkened sanctum of the observatory, Dr. Eris Thorne sits as a solitary sentinel. He's a man defined by silence, his life measured not in hours or days, but in the slow, inexorable arrival of photons that have spent millennia traversing the void. Outside the reinforced walls of the laboratory, the wind howls with a primordial ferocity, a reminder of the raw forces that shape this planet. Inside, there is only the rhythmic hum of cooling systems and the soft amber glow of monitors. The contrast is a localized defiance of entropy. Within this small pocket of warmth and light, human consciousness attempts to map the infinite. Thorne sips from a ceramic mug, the heat against his palms a fleeting comfort against the realization of what lies beyond the glass. He is looking for ghosts, the remnants of a cosmic past that refuse to stay buried in the dark. At this precise moment, a signal begins its final descent into the throat of the Great Telescope, the sophisticated successor to the James Webb. This signal is not a broadcast, nor is it a deliberate greeting. It is a faint, desperate pulse of infrared light, an accidental envoy that has escaped the gravity of the distant past. It is the lonely probe of the cosmos, a packet of energy carrying an unread message from the deep. It has survived the expansion of space, the interference of nebular dust, and the hungry reach of black holes. Now it finds its end in a sensor array cooled to temperatures approaching absolute zero. The screen flickers. A jagged line disrupts the flat horizon of the data stream. Eris Thorne freezes. In the silence of the inner solar system, something has moved. The object designated by the automated systems as 3i Atlas has just breached the invisible boundary of the local neighbourhood. It is travelling at 85 kilometers per second. This velocity is not merely a number, it is a violent intrusion into the stillness of our celestial backyard. At 85 kilometers per second, the distance between the Moon and the Earth is closed in little more than 1 hour. It is a speed that mocks the slow, biological pace of human evolution. 3i Atlas does not drift. It cuts through the vacuum like a blade of obsidian. Thorne watches as the telemetry unfolds. The object is a dark wanderer, a remnant of an epoch long forgotten. It emerged from the freezing vacuum, a place where the sun is but a particularly bright star among millions, and where the concept of warmth is a distant, impossible memory. The contrast is staggering. Within the laboratory, the air is a precise 21 degrees Celsius. Outside, the object carries the soul-crushing chill of the interstellar void, a cold so profound that it ceases to be a temperature and becomes a state of being. 3i Atlas is an accidental sentinel. It was not sent by a creator, nor was it steered by an intelligence we would recognize. It is a product of the ruthless machine that is the universe, a fragment of a catastrophe that occurred before the first mammalian heart began to beat on Earth. As it hurtles toward the inner circles of our system, it carries with it the story of its origin, a story written in the language of mineral composition and isotopic decay. It is a message that has been travelling through the silence for eons, waiting for a witness capable of translation. The Doctor's breath hitches. He realises that he is the first consciousness in the history of this planet to acknowledge the existence of this specific traveller. The gravity of this moment settles over him, heavier than the atmospheric pressure at sea level. He is no longer just a scientist, he is the recipient of a cosmic inheritance. The object is moving too fast to be captured, too dark to be easily seen by the naked eye, yet it is undeniably there. It is a ghost made manifest by the precision of human engineering. He thinks of the object as a lonely probe, not of metal and wire, but of stone and ice, a natural satellite of some forgotten sun that was cast out into the eternal night. It has spent billions of years in the darkness, a silent witness to the birth and death of stars. Now it has stumbled into the light of our sun, an intruder in a garden it does not understand. The mechanism of its arrival is purely mathematical, governed by the inexorable laws of celestial mechanics, yet Thorn cannot help but feel a sense of melancholic kinship with it. Like the object, he's a small, fragile thing, attempting to navigate a vast and often hostile landscape. The data continues to pour in, a symphony of numbers that describe a trajectory leading into the heart of our world, 85 kilometers per second. The velocity is a testament to the scale paradox. To a human, it is an incomprehensible blur. To the galaxy, it is a crawl, a minuscule displacement in a tapestry that spans 100,000 light-years. This discrepancy is where the awe resides. We exist in the narrow margin between the microscopic and the macroscopic, trying to find meaning in the motion of a rock through the abyss. Thorn reaches for his keyboard, his fingers trembling slightly. He must alert the others, the network of sentinels stationed around the globe, but for a few more seconds he chooses to remain the sole keeper of this secret. He watches the infrared signature of 3i Atlas, a tiny glowing ember against the backdrop of absolute oblivion. It is beautiful in its indifference. It does not care that it has been detected. It does not care about the warmth of the laboratory or the aspirations of the man watching it. It simply is. The universe is a ruthless machine, an engine of entropy and motion that unravels the structures we build with such care. Yet, in this moment, the machine has produced something miraculous. It has brought two entities together across the gulf of time and space, a piece of primordial debris and a curious mind. The detection of 3i Atlas is the first ripple in a coming tide, a sign that the silence of the inner solar system is an illusion. The abyss is not empty. It is crowded with the remnants of 1 trillion failed worlds and the seeds of 1 billion others. As the clock on his monitor ticks forward, Aris Thorn prepares to break the silence. He will announce to the world that we are being visited by a messenger from the deep. He will tell them of the speed, the cold, and the dark, but he will keep the feeling of this moment to himself, the feeling of standing at the edge of the world, looking out into the eternal void and seeing, for a brief, flickering instant, a light that was never meant for him. The journey of 3i Atlas is nearly at its midpoint, and as it plunges deeper into the warmth of the sun, the story of the universe prepares to turn a new and perhaps final page. The silence of the laboratory is broken not by a sound, but by the cold finality of a calculation. As the processors hum in their air-conditioned tombs, they begin to weave a geometry that does not belong to our world. Aris Thorn watches as the arc of the intruder is traced across his screen, a line of light that refuses to bend into the familiar circles of our solar system. This is the moment of realization, the transition from a mere discovery to the understanding of a cosmic tragedy. The object, this 3i Atlas, is moving with a velocity that defies the grip of our sun. It possesses what the architects of orbital mechanics call hyperbolic excess velocity. It is a traveller with too much energy, a wanderer with too much momentum to ever call this place home. To understand the nature of this motion, one must imagine the solar system not as a series of fixed paths, but as a deep, gravity well carved into the fabric of space and time. Our planets are like marbles rolling forever around the inner slopes of a great bowl, trapped by the massive weight of the sun at the centre. But 3i Atlas does not roll. It plunges. It enters the bowl from the heights of the great dark, screams through the centre, and climbs out the other side with such ferocity that the sun's gravity is powerless to hold it. It is a stone thrown by a giant across the surface of a wide and ancient river. The stone was never intended to land on this shore. It was never meant to sink into our waters. It merely skips across the surface of our reality, destined to vanish into the woods on the far bank, leaving nothing but a fading ripple in the minds of those who watched it pass. This hyperbolic trajectory is the signature of the outcast. It tells us that this piece of primordial stone and ice was born under the light of a different star, in a cradle we can only dream of visiting. The mathematics are inexorable, By reversing the tape of time, by unwinding the clockwork of the cosmos, the sentinels of Earth can trace the path of the intruder back through the absolute void. The line stretches away from our Sun, out past the orbit of Neptune, out beyond the icy reach of the Kuiper Belt, and into the terrifying emptiness of interstellar space. The calculation leads back 2,400,000 years. In that distant epoch, while the ancestors of humanity were first learning to walk upright upon the African savanna, this object was being cast out from its home. It originated in the direction of the Pleiades, that shimmering cluster of blue jewels known to the ancients as the Seven Sisters. We imagine a catastrophe in that celestial nursery, perhaps a close encounter between two massive stars, or the violent death of a neighbouring planet that acted as a gravitational catapult. 3i Atlas was the casualty of that mechanical cruelty. It was flung away from its parent sun, ejected into the abyss with a velocity that ensured it would never return. For 2,400,000 years, it has known only the silence of the void. It has crossed a distance so vast that the human mind, built to measure the length of a day or the height of a tree, can only recoil in horror. It has drifted through a vacuum so perfect that not a single atom of gas disturbed its surface for centuries at a time. It has endured the absolute zero of the deep, a cold so profound that motion itself seems like an affront to the stillness of the universe. During this immense journey, the object was a phantom, a ghost ship sailing a sea of nothingness. It passed through the territory of forgotten stars and navigated the shoreless oceans between the spiral arms of our galaxy. The scale paradox is most cruel here. To the object, the journey was a singular, unchanging moment of inertia. To the universe, it was a blink in the eye of eternity. But to us, 2,400,000 years is a span of time that encompasses the entire rise of our species. While this rock was falling through the dark, mountains were raised and ground into dust. Oceans rose and fell. Entire languages were born, spoken by millions and forgotten. The stone remained indifferent to it all. It did not care for the fire of the first hearths or the glow of the first cities. It was a silent sentinel of the abyss, a remnant of a world that likely no longer exists in the form it once knew. This is the geometry of the outcast. It is a path that intersects with our lives for a few brief weeks before returning to the oblivion from which it emerged. We are witnesses to a cosmic accident, a chance alignment of trajectories in a tapestry of 100 billion stars. The velocity of 3i Atlas is its shield against the sun's embrace. It is moving at tens of thousands of kilometers per hour, a speed that transforms the solar system into a mere checkpoint on a journey that has no destination. As Thorne stares at the data, he begins to see the object not as a threat, but as a messenger of the inexorable nature of entropy. The universe is a machine that constantly unbinds itself. Stars drift apart, galaxies retreat from one another, and pieces of broken worlds are scattered like dust in a wind that never stops blowing. We seek patterns and meaning in the motion of the heavens, but the hyperbolic path of the intruder reminds us that some things are simply passing through. They do not belong to us. They do not belong to our sun. They belong only to the void. The journey from the Pleiades was not a straight line, but a complex dance influenced by the invisible tides of the galactic disk. Every star the object passed exerted a tiny ghostly pull, a gravitational sigh that altered its course by a fraction of a degree. It is a miracle of mathematics that we can trace this path at all, that our fragile minds can reach back through 2,400,000 years of darkness to find the point of origin. It is a testament to the power of the human spirit, a small light burning in the vastness, trying to map the movements of the giants. Yet there is a profound melancholy in this knowledge. To know where the object came from is to recognize how truly alone it is. It has travelled for eons without the warmth of a star, a frozen wanderer in a desert of light years. And now, as it reaches the perihelion of its journey, as it feels the intense heat of our sun for the first and only time, it will not stay. It cannot stay. The laws of the cosmos demand that it continue its flight. It will carry the warmth of our sun back into the abyss, a tiny memory of light that will slowly fade as it heads toward the stars of the distant future. The story of 3i Atlas is the story of everything that has ever been lost. It is the story of the debris of creation, the fragments of the symphony that did not find a place in the final arrangement. As it begins its long climb out of our gravity well, we are left to contemplate the sheer scale of the desert it has crossed. 2,400,000 years of silence. 2,400,000 years of the void. And we, for a fleeting moment, are the ones who get to say that we saw it. We are the ones who calculated its speed and mapped its exile. We are the witnesses to the geometry of the outcast, standing on the shore of our little island, watching a stone skip once, twice, and then vanish forever into the night. But as the intruder draws closer to the furnace of our solar system, the geometry of its flight begins to surrender its secrets to a new and more unsettling observation. The silence of the vacuum is replaced by a ghostly radiance. For eons, 3i Atlas has existed in a state of near absolute zero, a temperature so profound that atomic motion itself almost ceases. It was a piece of the void, indistinguishable from the blackness it inhabited. But now, as it pierces the inner sanctum of our world, the object begins to speak in the language of heat. The thermal sensors on our most sensitive orbital observatories detect a subtle, impossible shift. This is the sunward glow, a phenomenon that defies the simple expectations of a frozen wanderer. To understand the strangeness of this moment, one must imagine a vast, unlit cathedral shrouded in eternal midnight. In the centre of this cavernous dark, a single, dying ember begins to pulse with a faint crimson light. It does not illuminate the room, but it announces its presence through the invisible reach of infrared radiation. This is what we see when we look at the intruder. It is no longer a cold shadow. It is a body coming to life, radiating energy into the abyss. Under the cold laws of black-body equilibrium, an object of this size and composition should behave with predictable uniformity. As it absorbs the photons streaming from our sun, it should warm slowly, distributing that energy across its surface as it tumbles through the vacuum. Scientists expected a gradual rise, a steady climb toward a temperature that would still be far below the freezing point of water, but the data reveals a catastrophe of thermal physics. Instead of a gentle warming, the leading edge of the object exhibits a sudden, violent spike. The sensors register a localized temperature of 450 Kelvin. This is not the warmth of a sun-drenched rock. This is the heat of a machine under stress, or perhaps a sentinel stirring from a sleep that has lasted for millions of years. 450 Kelvin is a temperature that stands in defiance of the surrounding vacuum. It is hot enough to melt lead, hot enough to transform volatile ices into high-pressure jets of gas. Yet, the heat is not distributed evenly. It is concentrated with surgical precision on the forward-facing prow of the object, the part that cuts through the solar wind like the bow of a ship. This localized intensity suggests a mechanism at work that transcends the simple absorption of light. It is as if the object is not merely being warmed by our sun, but is actively reacting to it. We are forced to consider the possibility that 3i Atlas is not a passive fragment of a broken world, but a lonely probe, an ancient vessel designed to harvest the energy of the stars it passes. As the solar radiation hits the leading edge, the material itself seems to transform. The infrared signature pulses with a rhythmic frequency, a heartbeat of light that suggests the internal redistribution of energy. In the laboratories of Earth, this spike of 450 Kelvin is treated with a mixture of awe and dread. It challenges our understanding of the interstellar medium. If this were a simple comet, we would see the halo of a coma, the magnificent tail of dust and gas trailing behind it for millions of kilometers. But 3i Atlas remains clean. There is no shroud of debris, no chaotic venting of gas. There is only the heat. It is a clean, efficient conversion of solar energy, a silent process that occurs within the very fabric of the object. The thermal physics of the vacuum are a ruthless master. In the absence of an atmosphere, heat cannot be carried away by the wind. It can only be lost through the slow, inexorable process of radiation. For the leading edge to maintain such a high temperature while the trailing side remains locked in the grip of the deep freeze, the material of the object must possess a thermal conductivity that is unknown to our science. It is a tapestry of contradictions. It is a solid that behaves like a superconductor, a relic that acts like a living organism. As we watch this ghostly heat bloom across our screens, the motif of the lonely probe becomes inescapable. We begin to see the object as a weary traveller reaching a campfire after an eternity in the snow. It does not stop to rest, it does not seek shelter. It simply holds its frozen hands to the flames for a brief, flickering moment, drawing in enough energy to sustain its journey across the next great void. The 450 Kelvin spike is the sound of an engine turning over, the groan of ancient metal expanding, the first breath of a titan that has forgotten the sensation of warmth. The sunward glow is more than a data point in a thermal profile. It is a bridge between the primordial past and the distant future. The energy it absorbs today will be carried in the heart of the object as it exits our solar system and returns to the dark. It is a battery being charged by the light of a star it will never see again. We are witnesses to this intimate exchange, observers of a celestial refueling that takes place in the silence of the high heavens. The heat radiates outward, a signal sent into the oblivion, announcing that for one brief epoch, the outcast was not cold. But there is a haunting quality to this awakening. To see the object glow is to realize that it is burning itself away. Every joule of energy it absorbs, every degree it rises, is a step toward its eventual decay. The universe does not allow for a perfect machine. Entropy is the tax that all things must pay, even the sentinels of the void. As the leading edge pulses with its 450 Kelvin light, we are seeing the slow unravelling of a masterpiece. The heat that gives it life is also the force that will eventually turn it to dust. We stand on our spinning world, peering through the lens of our technology at a mystery that we may never solve. The sunward glow fades as the object moves into the shadow of its own trajectory, but the memory of that heat remains. It is a reminder that the cosmos is not a graveyard of cold stones, but a vast and complex mechanism where even the most solitary travellers are bound by the laws of energy and light. 3i Atlas carries its secret heat back into the abyss, a glowing ember in the dark room of the universe, leaving us to wonder what other fires are burning in the depths of the eternal night. The spike of 450 Kelvin was not just a temperature, it was a scream in the infrared, a declaration of existence from a phantom that refuses to be forgotten. The heat was merely the first whisper of a much deeper discordance. As the object retreated from the brilliance of the sun and began its long, lonely descent back into the freezing dark, our instruments revealed a second mystery that defied the very foundations of celestial mechanics. It was moving too fast. According to the cold, elegant laws of gravity, an object of its mass and distance should have followed a precisely predictable arc, a path carved into the fabric of space-time by the singular influence of our star. Yet, as we measured its progress against the backdrop of the distant stars, we found a subtle but undeniable departure from the expected trajectory. It was as if the vacuum of space itself had grown a conscience, or as if some invisible hand was gently nudging the traveller away from its destiny. This non-gravitational acceleration was the ghost in the machine, an anomaly that whispered of forces we had yet to name. The deviation was minute, a mere 0.001% difference from the path dictated by the sun's reach. In the vast theatre of the cosmos, such a fraction might seem like a rounding error, a flickering ghost of data lost in the static. But in the realm of high-precision physics, 0.001% is a catastrophe. It represents a fundamental break in the symphony of the spheres. This was not a random wobble or a trick of the light. It was a persistent, systematic push that lasted for the duration of its passage through the inner solar system. We were forced to confront the reality that this object was not a passive passenger of the void. It was being propelled by a mechanism that remained hidden from our eyes, a phantom engine working in the silence of the high heavens. In our search for an answer, we turned to the familiar. We looked to the comets, those dirty snowballs that have haunted human history since the primordial dawn. When a comet approaches the sun, it undergoes a violent transformation. The frozen gases trapped within its heart begin to sublimate, turning directly from solid to vapour. This process, known as outgassing, creates a visible tail, a luminous shroud of dust and gas that stretches for millions of miles. This gas acts as a natural thruster, a biological reaction of the stone to the heat of the star, pushing the comet off its gravitational course. But as we turned our most sensitive telescopes toward this lonely probe, we saw nothing. There was no shimmering tail, no veil of dust, no glowing coma to mark its passage. The space around the object remained as clear and vacant as the abyss itself. The mystery deepened when we looked for the chemical signatures of life and decay. A comet is a chemical factory spewing out clouds of water vapour, carbon monoxide, and the deadly scent of cyanide gas. Our spectrometers, capable of detecting a single molecule in a sea of nothingness, returned a haunting silence. There was no cyanide. There was no carbon. There was only the object, solid and inscrutable, moving through the void without leaving a trace of its breath behind. The physical impossibility of traditional sublimation began to weigh heavily on our collective consciousness. To achieve an acceleration of 0.001% through the expulsion of gas, the object would have had to shed a massive portion of its total weight in a matter of weeks. It would have had to be a crumbling ruin, a disintegrating remnant losing its very essence to the solar wind. Yet the data showed a stable, rigid body, a sentinel that refused to unravel. We were looking at a tapestry of contradictions. If it was outgassing, where was the gas? If it was a comet, where was the tail? The laws of physics are inexorable, and they do not allow for a push without a propellant. We began to imagine the object as a weary traveller possessing a technology we could not comprehend, or perhaps a natural phenomenon so rare that it had no name in our lexicons. We called it a ghost, but even ghost must obey the laws of the universe. The mechanism of its flight remained a closed book. We hypothesized about the pressure of sunlight itself, the gentle rain of photons tapping against the surface of the object like raindrops on a tin roof. For such a force to account for the observed acceleration, the object would have to be extraordinarily thin, a solar sail no thicker than a sheet of paper, stretched across a frame of impossible lightness. But the thermal data we had gathered earlier, the spike of 450 Kelvin, suggested a different story. It suggested something solid, something with the capacity to hold heat and radiate it back into the oblivion. We found ourselves caught between two impossibilities. It was either a solid stone that moved like a leaf in the wind, or it was a hollow shell that carried the weight of a mountain. Neither explanation fit the reality of the Sentinel. The more we looked, the more we realised that our traditional categories were failing us. The object was not a comet, nor was it a simple asteroid. It was something else entirely, a third thing, a remnant of a process that perhaps took place in the heart of a distant nebula eons ago. This deviation was not just a mathematical curiosity, it was an existential pivot. It forced us to realise that the universe is far more complex than our models allow. We are like children watching a clockwork mechanism, understanding the movement of the hands but ignorant of the gears and springs that drive them from within. The ghost in the machine was a reminder that we are still in the infancy of our understanding. We live on a small island of knowledge in a vast sea of mystery, and sometimes a message from the deep washes up on our shores, written in a language we have forgotten how to read. The 0.001% deviation was that message, a subtle declaration that the cosmos is not a finished work, but a living, breathing machine that still holds its secrets close to its chest. As the object moved further away, crossing the orbit of the outer giants, the acceleration remained a haunting presence in our equations. It did not fade as the sun's heat diminished, at least not at the rate we expected. It was as if the engine, once ignited, was determined to carry the traveller back into the eternal night. We watched it go, a lonely probe receding into the dark, carrying the secret of its propulsion with it. We were left with the data, the cold, hard numbers that told a story of a phantom push and a missing tail. The mechanism remained hidden, a silent engine driving a silent ship through the silent void. In the silence of our observatories, we began to feel a sense of melancholic optimism. If such things could exist, if an object could defy our expectations and move with an unseen grace through the abyss, then the universe was still a place of wonder. It was not a dead graveyard of rocks and radiation, but a symphony of unknown forces, a tapestry woven with threads of light and shadow that we were only beginning to perceive. The ghost in the machine was not a haunting, but an invitation. It invited us to look deeper, to think harder, and to accept that there are things in the dark that we may never fully understand. The Sentinel was leaving us, but it left behind a crack in the door of our reality, a glimpse into a wider cosmos where the impossible is merely a law we have yet to discover. The inexorable march of time would eventually carry the object beyond the reach of our longest-lived probes, but the memory of its defiance would remain, a flickering candle in the dark room of our history. The data returned to us was not a chaotic jumble of noise, but a structured poem written in the language of the light. As the Sentinel glided further into the cold embrace of the outer solar system, our instruments gathered the final, most haunting pieces of the puzzle. Spectroscopic analysis, the process of slicing light into its fundamental colours to reveal the chemical identity of a distant object, provided a revelation that shattered our remaining illusions. We were not looking at a primordial relic of a frozen world. We were looking at a piece of refined intent. The spectrum revealed the unmistakable signature of molybdenum, an element that, while present in the crusts of rocky worlds, rarely congregates in the pure, concentrated form we witnessed. Imagine walking across a vast, desolate plain of jagged basalt and shattered granite, a field of raw stones shaped only by the mindless violence of tectonic shifts and the slow erosion of time. Then, amidst the grey chaos, you see a glint of light. You reach down and pull from the dust a single polished gear. Its teeth are perfect, its edges are chamfered to a sub-millimetre precision, and its surface is smooth to a degree that defies the natural world. You do not need to see the machine from which it fell to know that it was once part of a greater whole. This gear is a witness to a purpose. It is a testament to a designer who understood the laws of friction and force. This was the sensation that rippled through the scientific community as the spectroscopic data crystallized into certainty. The Sentinel was a refined splinter, a discarded fragment of a mechanism that operated on scales we could scarcely imagine. The isotopic ratios of carbon within the object told an even more unsettling story. In the natural cosmos, carbon isotopes like carbon-12 and carbon-13 exist in a predictable, messy balance, dictated by the random collisions of cosmic rays and the slow decay of stellar furnaces. But within this traveller, the balance was gone. The carbon was refined, distilled until it reached a purity that whispered of industrial processes. It was as if someone had taken the raw soot of 1,000 suns and sieved it through a metaphysical filter, retaining only the specific isotopes required for structural perfection. This was not the work of gravity or heat. This was the result of a refinement process that sought to transcend the limitations of the primordial void. To understand the magnitude of this discovery, we must look at the ladder of abstraction. On the bottom rung, we find the raw, uncarved stone of the universe, the hydrogen and helium that fill the abyss. As we climb, the atoms become more complex, forged in the hearts of dying stars. But the highest rungs are occupied by materials that the universe cannot create on its own. These are the isotopes sorted by the hand of consciousness, the metals purified by the fires of a focused will. The Sentinel sat upon this highest rung. It was a 3-eye atlas of precision, a topographic map of a technology that had mastered the very building blocks of reality. It was a remnant of a civilization that did not merely survive the cosmos, but chose to rewrite its chemical laws to suit its own ends. The presence of such high concentrations of molybdenum served as a silent sentinel of its own. In the harsh environment of the deep void, where radiation devours the integrity of matter and the absolute zero of space turns common metals into brittle glass, molybdenum is a shield. It is a guardian against the inexorable decay of the machine. Its presence suggested that this object was built to endure the eons, to cross the vast gulfs between the stars without succumbing to the catastrophe of structural failure. We were looking at the skeleton of a dream, a piece of hardware designed by a mind that viewed the crossing of the galaxy not as a miracle, but as a technical problem to be solved with the right alloy. This refinement was a declaration of independence from the chaos of the natural world. Every atom of refined carbon was a defiance of the ruthless machine of entropy. We began to see the object not as a mystery to be solved, but as a message to be translated. It was a ghost in the machine of our solar system, a reminder that we are not the only ones who have looked at the stars and wondered how to reach them. The 3-Eye Atlas was a discard, a piece of precision technology that had likely fulfilled its mission millions of years ago, only to be cast adrift in the eternal night. It was a relic of a forgotten pioneer, a lonely probe that had outlived its creators and its purpose, yet still carried the evidence of their greatness in its very marrow. As we contemplated the refined nature of the splinter, a sense of melancholic optimism began to take hold. If such things could be built, if the raw elements of the universe could be bent and polished into such exquisite forms, then the potential of consciousness was truly infinite. We are a species that still struggles to leave our own atmosphere, yet here was proof that the abyss had been crossed before. The sentinel was a mirror, reflecting our own future possibilities back at us from the depths of the void. It showed us that the tapestry of the cosmos is not just woven with light and shadow, but with the threads of deliberate creation. The silence of the object became even more profound. It did not need to broadcast a signal or transmit a greeting. Its very existence was the message. The refined isotopes were the syllables, and the molybdenum was the punctuation. It told a story of a distant epoch, a time when a civilization reached out into the dark and left behind a trail of polished gears for us to find. We were like children finding a stopwatch on a beach, unable to comprehend the complexity of the springs and levers inside, yet certain that it was not a shell or a stone. The inexorable march of the sentinel continued, carrying it away from our gaze and back into the oblivion from which it emerged. We watched it go with a heavy heart, knowing that we might never see its like again. The data we gathered would be studied for centuries, a treasure trove of anomalies that would challenge our understanding of what is natural and what is artificial. We were left with the realization that the universe is far more crowded with the remnants of the past than we had ever dared to dream. The 3-Eye Atlas was gone, but the crack it had opened in our reality remained. We were no longer just observers of a cold and silent machine. We were witnesses to a legacy, a small part of a grand symphony of creation that spans the eons and transcends the limits of our own brief history. The refined splinter was a gift from the deep, a reminder that in the vastness of the cosmos, nothing is ever truly lost, and even the smallest gear can tell the story of the entire universe. But the most profound revelation lay not merely in the composition of its marrow, but in its very geometry, a shape that whispered of a purpose far more elegant than simple transit. To understand this object, we must discard our earthly notions of heavy engines and burning chemical fires. We must instead look upon the cosmos as an ocean, not of water, but of shimmering invisible force. The Sentinel was not a projectile launched through a vacuum. It was a vessel designed to catch the very breath of the stars. This was the hypothesis of the light sail, a concept that transforms the sun from a distant lantern into a source of inexorable propulsion. For eons, this silent ship had navigated the void, its vast and gossamer wings unfurled to capture a power that we have only recently begun to comprehend. In our everyday lives, we perceive light as a ghost, a weightless presence that illuminates our path without exerting a single ounce of pressure. Yet, in the cold precision of the abyss, light reveals its hidden strength. Every photon that strikes a surface carries a minute, almost imperceptible momentum. In the aggregate, the billions upon billions of particles streaming from a star act like a steady wind, a constant stream of radiation that can push an object across the tapestry of the universe. To harness this force, one requires a canvas of impossible lightness and immense scale. The object we observed was exactly that, a masterwork of engineering where the mass-to-area ratio was refined to a degree that defies our common experience. For every square metre of its reflective surface, there existed a mass of only 0.1 grams. To envision such a structure is to imagine a sheet of silver foil thinner than the membrane of a living cell, yet spanning the width of a city. This was the canvas of light, a remnant of a technology that treated the vacuum of space as a medium for sailing. The sun, in this context, is no longer just a source of warmth. It is a furnace of pressure. The radiation it emits acts as a relentless hand, pushing against the sail with the friction of light itself. It is a slow and patient method of travel, requiring years or centuries to build momentum. But once the sentinel caught the stellar wind, it became a nomad of the infinite, a lonely probe destined to drift through the silent epoch of the cosmos. This lonely probe was a testament to a civilization that understood the ruthless machine of the universe and found a way to dance within its gears. They did not fight the vacuum, they embraced it. They realized that the very energy that sustains life on a planet could also be the bridge between the stars. The object was a silent sentinel, a witness to the vast distances it had traversed. As it caught the light of our own sun, its surface would have glowed with a faint ethereal radiance, not from any internal fire, but from the sheer intensity of the light reflecting off its polished face. This glow was the visual manifestation of the propulsion taking place, the physical evidence of photons surrendering their energy to push this ancient messenger toward its next destination. The scale of such an undertaking is staggering to the human mind. To build a craft with a ratio of 0.1 grams per square metre requires a level of precision that transcends our current capabilities. It is the art of building something from nothing, of stretching atoms until they are a translucent veil against the dark. This was not a weapon or a crude tool of exploration. It was a symphony of physics and intent. It represented a moment in the history of a distant world when its inhabitants looked at the light of their sun and saw not just a fire, but a road. They saw the potential to unravel the mysteries of the void by hitching their dreams to the very radiation that gave them life. As we watched the object continue its journey into the oblivion of interstellar space, we were struck by the sheer loneliness of its mission. It was a discarded relic, a forgotten pioneer that had likely spent millions of years in the cold between the stars. It had no crew to maintain it, no signal to guide it, only the inexorable pressure of the light to keep it moving. It was a mirror held up to our own ambition, reflecting back the fragility of our efforts to reach beyond our cradle. We are used to the roar of rockets and the violence of combustion, but the Sentinel spoke of a more patient and profound way of being. It spoke of a future where we might also learn to sail the currents of the cosmos, guided by the silent pressure of 1,000 suns. The friction of light is a concept that bridges the gap between the mundane and the celestial. We feel the warmth of the sun on our skin and think of it as a comfort, but to the sail that same warmth is a shove, a gentle yet persistent nudge that, over the course of eons, can propel a craft to speeds that dwarf our fastest machines. The radiation of the sun is a constant tide, and the Sentinel was a ship designed to ride it to the very edge of the solar system and beyond. It was a reminder that the universe is not just a void to be crossed, but a landscape of forces to be understood and utilised. The Three-Eye Atlas was a masterpiece of this understanding, a physical manifestation of the laws of physics turned into a vessel of discovery. Even as it recedes into the abyss, the legacy of the light sail remains etched in our data. It challenged our understanding of what a spacecraft could be, moving away from the heavy and the mechanical toward the light and the transcendental. We began to see the cosmos as a vast web of energy, where every star is a beacon and a motor, and every planet is a potential harbour for those who know how to catch the wind. The lonely probe, with its 0.1 grams per square metre of mass, was a messenger from a distant epoch, telling us that the abyss is not impassable. It is merely a matter of finding the right canvas and having the patience to let the light carry us home. In the end, the Sentinel was a gift of melancholic optimism. It showed us that while the universe is vast and often silent, it is not empty of intention. The refined splinter was a witness to a greatness that preceded us, a remnant of a dream that refused to be extinguished by the passage of time or the decay of entropy. As it drifts back into the eternal night, we are left with the knowledge that we are part of a larger story, a grand tapestry of light and shadow, where even a single photon can change the course of history. The canvas of light is always there, waiting for the next pioneer to unfurl their wings and join the silent symphony of the stars. We are no longer just observers of the dark, we are students of the light, learners in a school that spans the entire history of the universe. This school teaches us that the three-eye atlas is not merely an object of study, but a profound testament to the desire for permanence in a reality defined by decay. It is a letter written in the fundamental language of the cosmos, where the ink is composed of the very laws of physics that govern the motion of galaxies. Every fold of its shimmering surface and every molecule of its gossamer frame is a sentence composed in a grammar that does not require a human tongue to speak. It speaks in the enduring truths of gravity and electromagnetism and the inexorable pressure of photons. This is the unread letter, a message cast into the void by a hand that has long since turned to dust, drifting through the silence of the eternal night. When we look upon such a remnant, we are looking at a correspondence from a distant epoch, a missive intended for a recipient that may not even exist yet, or perhaps for a recipient that has already passed into the abyss. The universe is not merely a vacuum, it is a cosmic mailbox, a repository for the debris of civilizations that once dared to look upward. It is a silent hall of records where the artifacts of the brave and the desperate are filed away in the cold. A light sail, a pulse of radio waves, or the chemical signature of a dying atmosphere are the envelopes we leave behind in the dark. They float in the stillness, waiting for an observer to stumble upon them, yet the tragedy of this mailbox is its scale. The distances are so vast and the time spans so long that the sender is often extinguished before the message even clears the porch of their own solar system. We are left with the silence of the sender, a quietness so profound that it becomes a physical weight upon the soul. To send such a message is an act of supreme faith, a belief that even in the face of oblivion, something of the self might transcend the passage of eons. Imagine a bottle cast into a shoreless ocean. The bottle is the sentinel, and the ocean is the sea of stars. It bobbles on the currents of light, tossed by the gravity of passing suns, drifting through the eternal night without a compass or a map. There is no guarantee it will ever wash upon a shore or be found by a curious hand. It may spend 1 billion years in the loneliness of the intergalactic void, a single, coherent thought in a universe of chaos. This message in a bottle does not ask for help, nor does it demand a reply. It simply states that it existed. It is a ripple in the tapestry of time, a minor chord in the symphony of the stars that refuses to be resolved. The sender knew that the light carrying their craft would outlive their sun, their world, and their very name. They accepted the silence as part of the cost of being remembered by the void. The unread letter is a reflection of the scale paradox that defines our existence. We are small, fragile creatures bound to a tiny speck of dust, yet we possess the audacity to write our history on the canvas of the abyss. We use the mechanism of the stars to propel our dreams into the future, hoping that the light will preserve our essence long after the fire of our ambition has cooled. The three-eye atlas is the physical manifestation of this paradox. It is so light that it can be pushed by a sunbeam, yet it is durable enough to survive the catastrophe of time itself. It is a ghost ship sailing through a graveyard of forgotten worlds, carrying the unread secrets of a culture that understood the fragility of their own epoch. They did not build in stone or steel, for they knew that mountains crumble and empires fall. Instead, they built with light, the only thing in the universe that seems to touch the hem of the eternal. As we peer into the depths of this cosmic mailbox, we realize that we are surrounded by such letters. The background radiation of the cosmos is a letter from the beginning of time, a primordial hiss that tells the story of the first few seconds of existence. The heavy elements in our blood are letters written in the hearts of dying stars, delivered to us through the violence of a supernova. We are, in every sense, the recipients of messages we do not yet have the wisdom to fully decode. The Sentinel is just one more page in a book that spans the entire history of the universe, a chronicle of effort and loss that is still being written. The unread letter reminds us that the value of the message is not found in its arrival, but in the act of sending it. It is the defiance of the silence that matters, the refusal to be erased by the inexorable march of entropy. The tapestry of the universe is woven from these threads of light and shadow, and each thread represents a journey taken into the unknown. We see the 3-Eye Atlas not as a piece of technology, but as a poem written in the medium of reality. It is a work of art that requires no audience, a performance that takes place in the theatre of the void. The sender is silent because there is nothing left to say that the sail itself does not already communicate. It tells us that they saw the stars not as distant points of light, but as a destination. It tells us that they found a way to bridge the gap between the mundane and the transcendental, using the very energy that powers the cosmos to escape the gravity of their own limitations. They have become part of the background noise of the universe, a whisper in the dark that says we were here, and we were not afraid of the dark. This is the melancholic optimism that comes from understanding our place in the grand design. We are the witnesses, the readers of these unread letters. Our purpose is to gather the remnants of those who came before and to ensure that their voices are not entirely lost to the abyss. We are the ones who look at the light sail and see more than a splinter of glass. We see a bridge across the eons. The silence of the sender is not a sign of failure, but a testament to the scale of their ambition. They reached for the eternal, and in doing so, they left a mark upon the void that even the decay of time cannot fully erase. We are the inheritors of this legacy, the ones who must now decide what message we will leave in the cosmic mailbox for those who will follow us into the great unknown. As the Sentinel disappears into the oblivion of the far future, we are left to contemplate the unread letters of our own lives. What do we send out into the world that will survive the heat death of our own sun? What part of our spirit is light enough to be carried by the photons of history? The 3-Eye Atlas is a reminder that we are all pioneers and we are all leaving traces in the dust of the cosmos. The universe may be a ruthless machine, grinding stars into dust and devouring the light of entire galaxies, but it is also a canvas. And on that canvas, even the smallest light can leave a trail that lasts for 100 trillion years. We are the readers of the unread, the guardians of the silent, and the children of the light, forever seeking to understand the unread letter that is the history of the universe. In the freezing, oxygen-thin air atop the summit of Mauna Kea, the telescopes do not merely look at the sky, they sift through the wreckage of time. The data streaming into the digital reservoirs of these observatories is often treated as a contemporary report, a live feed of the celestial theatre. Yet, this is a profound misunderstanding of the mechanism of the cosmos. What the astronomers are witnessing is not a contact event in any human sense of the term. It is an archaeological excavation. To receive a signal from the depths of the abyss is to touch the cold remains of a world that likely ceased to exist before the first pyramids were raised in the desert sands. We are not listening to the living, we are reading the testament of the dead. This is the fundamental cruelty of the speed of light. It is an inexorable barrier, a cosmic speed limit that ensures no two civilizations can ever truly speak to one another. The universe is a vast tapestry of disconnected monologues, a series of voices crying out into the void, each separated by gulfs of time so immense that they defy the comprehension of a biological mind. When we look at the distant flickering of a star, we are observing a ghost. If a civilization orbiting that star sent a message toward the Earth 3,000 years ago, they did so with the hope that someone might be there to listen. But by the time those photons finally collide with the mirrors of our telescopes, the authors of that message have long since surrendered to oblivion. Their cities are dust, their languages are forgotten, and their very sun may have unravelled into a planetary nebula. We are like children finding a message in a bottle on a desolate shore, only to realise that the person who wrote the note has been dead for 5 centuries. The message does not invite a reply, it merely documents a presence that once was. This is the loneliness of discovery. The realisation that we are not part of a galactic community, but rather the curators of a celestial museum. Every signal we decode from the Sentinel is a fragment of a lost epoch, a remnant of a struggle that has already been won or lost in a past we can never visit. The authors of the 3-Eye Atlas are not waiting for our answer. They cannot hear us. They are part of the silent history of the universe, a chronicle written in light but anchored in the grave. The speed of our light acts as a firewall against the possibility of synchronicity. It dictates that every observer is trapped in their own bubble of time, seeing the universe not as it is, but as it was at varying intervals of the distant past. A star 10 light-years away is seen as it was 10 years ago. A galaxy 100 million light-years away is seen as it was when dinosaurs walked the Earth. There is no such thing as a universal now. In this fragmented reality, the idea of a conversation becomes a poetic impossibility. We are perpetually late to the party. We arrive at the scene of the crime millions of years after the perpetrator has vanished into the dark. This creates a paradox of scale that is both terrifying and beautiful. We exert tremendous effort to build sensors capable of detecting the faint whisper of a gravitational wave or the subtle shift in the spectrum of a distant sun. Yet the reward for this effort is the confirmation of our own isolation. We find evidence of grand designs, of monumental engineering projects like the light sail, only to understand that we are the sole witnesses to a performance that ended eons ago. The Sentinel is a sentinel of nothingness, guarding the memory of a species that the universe has already forgotten. It drifts through the void as a silent witness to its own obsolescence, a masterpiece with no owner and no destination other than the eventual decay of its own atoms. At Mauna Kea, the researchers look at the screens and see patterns of light that suggest a complex intentional origin. They speak of the discovery in the present tense, as if the sender is still there, huddled around a radio transmitter or a laser array, waiting with bated breath for a response from the stars. But the math of the cosmos is cold and indifferent to our desire for companionship. The distance is too great. The void is too deep. By the time our reply could reach the coordinates of the sender, even the planet they called home might have been devoured by the expanding red giant of their aging star. We are shouting into a canyon so wide that the echo takes 10,000 years to return, by which time we ourselves will have become the archaeology for some other, younger eyes. This is the ruthless machine of entropy at work. It does not just destroy matter, it destroys the possibility of connection. It ensures that every spark of consciousness is an island, an isolated flame flickering in a primordial night. The signals we receive are not invitations to join a symphony, they are the final notes of a song that has already concluded. We are the listeners of the aftermath. We are the ones who gather the crumbs of information left behind by those who dared to defy the silence, even if that defiance was ultimately futile. Yet, in this melancholic realization, there is a strange form of optimism. To be the witness to these monologues is a sacred task. We are the ones who ensure that the void does not have the final word. By decoding the message, by acknowledging the existence of the sender who is now dust, we rescue them from total erasure. We incorporate their story into the tapestry of our own understanding. The act of observation is an act of resurrection. We bring the ghosts of the past into the light of our own present, giving their final monologue an audience at last. The universe may be a collection of silent, empty rooms, but for a brief moment, We have opened the door to one of them and looked inside. We have seen the evidence of a mind that once contemplated the same stars we see tonight. We have felt the weight of their ambition and the tragedy of their inevitable end. The speed of light may be a barrier that prevents us from ever shaking hands with the other, but it is also the very thing that preserves their memory. The light travels for millions of years, unchanging and pure, carrying the signature of a world that is no more until it finds a home in the retina of a human eye. We are the children of the light, born from the remnants of exploded stars, and we are now the guardians of the messages those stars left behind. The sentinel, the three-eye atlas, the faint pulses of energy from the distant reaches of the cosmos. These are the unread letters of the universe. We may never be able to reply, and we may never know the faces of those who wrote them, but in the act of reading we transcend the limitations of our own brief lives. We become part of something that spans the eons, a witness to the grand and tragic beauty of a universe that is constantly shouting into the dark, hoping against all odds that someone somewhere is listening to the silence. As we sit in the shadow of the great telescopes, surrounded by the cold majesty of the Hawaiian night, we accept our role as the final audience for a cast of billions who have already left the stage. We are the readers of the unread, the ones who find meaning in the monologue of the stars. The three-eye atlas has completed its vigil. Its golden optics, once the pinnacle of our desperate curiosity, now turn away from the warmth of the inner circle and toward the absolute dark. We are watching the final departure of a sentinel that has served as our surrogate in the heavens, a lonely pilgrim that is now beginning its long, slow descent into the frozen ocean of the interstellar night. This is the moment where the cord is cut, where the tether of gravity and the warmth of the sun become nothing more than a memory recorded in a dying memory bank. The probe moves with an inexorable momentum, driven by the legacy of fires ignited decades ago, passing beyond the invisible boundaries of our neighbourhood into the uncharted abyss. The journey began as a pursuit of knowledge, a frantic attempt to map the terrain of our celestial backyard. But now the mission evolves into something far more sombre. As the three-eye atlas drifts past the outermost reaches of the Kuiper Belt, it enters a region of space where the sun is no longer a disk of life-giving fire, but merely a particularly bright star among a billion others. The heliosphere, that protective bubble of solar wind that shields us from the harsh radiation of the wider cosmos, begins to thin and tarnish. The probe feels the first cold breath of the interstellar medium, a thin soup of hydrogen and helium that has been drifting in the void since the dawn of the current epoch. This is the shore of the cosmic ocean, and we are watching our small metal messenger step into the surf, never to return. The mechanism within the probe, a complex symphony of silicon and gold, is starting to slow. The radioactive heart that has powered its three mechanical eyes is decaying, its heat fading into the surrounding chill. In these final moments of awareness, the Sentinel sends back its last fragments of data, a series of pulses that travel across the vast distance at the speed of light. These are the final syllables of a long and storied conversation. We receive them as whispers, processed by the great dishes on the surface of our world, translated from electromagnetic waves into numbers and images. But even as we record these final observations, we know that the silence is approaching. The bandwidth narrows, the signal-to-noise ratio begins to favour the void, and eventually the last bit of information will be transmitted. When that final pulse arrives, the three-eye atlas will cease to be a functioning instrument, and will instead become a mathematical ghost. It will continue its trajectory not because it chooses to, but because the ruthless machine of celestial mechanics demands it. Without the guidance of its creators, without the internal spark of electricity to define its purpose, it is reduced to its most primal form, an arrangement of matter moving through a vacuum. It becomes a relic, a silent testament to a civilization that once possessed the audacity to reach out and touch the stars. It is no longer a tool, it is an artifact of the human epoch, drifting through a space that is indifferent to its origin. The transition is a quiet catastrophe, There are no explosions, no dramatic flashes of light, only the steady, silent march into the dark. The probe passes through the termination shock, that turbulent boundary where the solar wind crashes against the pressure of the interstellar gas and enters the heliopause. Here, the influence of our star finally gives way to the primordial pressure of the galaxy. The Three-Eye Atlas is now a citizen of the void. It is surrounded by a darkness so profound that it cannot be measured by human senses. In this abyss, the stars do not twinkle. They shine with a cold, unwavering light that has travelled for eons to reach this lonely point in space. We track its path with our mathematical models, long after our telescopes can no longer perceive its physical form. We project its trajectory forward through the centuries, seeing it pass through the Oort cloud, a vast shell of icy remnants that surrounds our solar system like a wall of frozen ghosts. It will take 10,000 years for the probe to navigate this final obstacle, drifting past mountains of ice that have never known the warmth of a sun. In this slow-motion exodus, time itself seems to stretch and unravel. The human lives that built the Sentinel will have long since returned to the dust, and the very languages they spoke may be forgotten, but the Three-Eye Atlas will remain, a silver needle threading through the fabric of the eternal night. The probe's journey is a microcosm of the fate that awaits all things in a universe governed by entropy. We build structures of meaning and complexity. We launch our thoughts into the heavens, and we hope that they will endure. But the void is patient. It does not need to destroy us. It only needs to wait for our energy to dissipate, for our signals to fade, and for our monuments to be swallowed by the scale paradox of the cosmos. The Three-Eye Atlas is the first of our emissaries to fully embrace this destiny. It is the pioneer of our eventual oblivion, the one who goes ahead to scout the territory of the end. As it moves further away, the distances involved become so vast that they defy the capacity of the mind to visualize them. 1 light year, then 10, then 100. The probe is moving toward the stars of the constellation of the Swan, but it will not arrive for hundreds of thousands of years. By the time it reaches the neighbourhood of another sun, that sun itself may have evolved, its own planets perhaps harbouring civilizations that will never know a tiny primitive machine is passing through their outskirts. The probe is a message in a bottle thrown into an ocean that has no shores. It is a scream that has been reduced to a whisper and then to a silence that lasts for eternity. The act of letting go is the final stage of our relationship with the Sentinel. We have nurtured it, directed it, and learned from it, but now we must accept its departure. We must recognise that the Three-Eye Atlas is no longer ours. It belongs to the galaxy now, a tiny knot of complexity in a sea of simplicity. It is a part of the tapestry of the interstellar medium, a foreign object that will be slowly eroded by the impact of micrometeoroids and the steady pressure of cosmic rays. Over the course of millions of years, its sharp edges will be dulled, its golden surfaces will be pitted and scarred, and it will slowly be reclaimed by the very elements from which it was forged. This is the ultimate return to the void. The Sentinel does not simply disappear, it fades. It dissolves into the background radiation of the universe, becoming a part of the silent history of the Milky Way. Its journey is a testament to the brief and brilliant flash of human existence, a spark that dared to illuminate the darkness before being consumed by it. We find a melancholic optimism in this realization. Though the probe is lost to us, and though its mission has ended in silence, the fact that it exists at all is a miracle. It is a proof of concept for the power of consciousness, a demonstration that for one brief shining moment, a collection of atoms on a small blue planet organized themselves well enough to send a piece of their world into the heart of the eternal. Now, as the last signals from the Three-Eye Atlas vanish into the noise of the cosmos, we turn our gaze back to our own world. We are left with the data, the images, and the memories of a journey that spanned the breadth of our imagination. We are the witnesses to its departure, the ones who stood on the shore and watched as the light of our creation was swallowed by the horizon. The void has reclaimed its own, and the Sentinel has found its final resting place in the vast, unfeeling embrace of the stars. It is a ghost in the machine of the universe, a silent traveller moving through the deep time of the galaxy, forever beyond our reach, forever a part of the eternity that waits for us all. The journey of the Sentinel is but a brief heartbeat in the long, slow exhale of the cosmos. As the light from our world recedes into the distance, we must confront a reality far vaster than the path of a single probe. The fate of the Three-Eye Atlas is the fate of all things. It is a precursor to a much larger unravelling, a quiet herald of the final epoch. We often imagine the universe as a permanent stage upon which the drama of life unfolds, but the stage itself is ephemeral. The very stars that guided the Sentinel on its lonely trek are themselves temporary flickers in an encroaching gloom. As the eons pass, the celestial furnace begins to exhaust its fuel. The vibrant blues and fierce whites of the great suns fade into the weary oranges and reds of dying giants. One by one, the lanterns of the galaxy are extinguished. This is the era of the remnant, where the universe is populated by the cinders of what once was. White dwarfs cool into blackness, and the majestic tapestries of nebulae are swept away by the expansion of space. The distances between galaxies grow so vast that light itself cannot bridge the gap. Each island of cooling matter becomes an isolated cell, drifting toward an inevitable oblivion. In this cooling dark, the mechanism of entropy reigns supreme. It is a ruthless machine that demands the degradation of all order. The complex structures we built, the data we gathered, and even the physical atoms of the Sentinel will eventually succumb to this inexorable pressure. Over time, scales that defy human comprehension, even the most stable matter begins to decay. The protons that form the heart of every atom, the primordial building blocks of existence, may have a finite lifespan. If they do, then the very foundations of the Three-Eye Atlas will slowly dissolve, turning the gold and silicon of our ambition into a fine mist of subatomic particles lost forever to the void. The universe moves toward a state of maximum entropy, a condition known as the heat death. It is not a fire, but a coldness so profound that no work can ever be performed again. The stars are gone, and the black holes, those terrifying devouring giants of the abyss, become the last remaining structures of any significance. Yet even they are not eternal. Through a slow, agonizing process of vaporation, they leak their mass back into the vacuum. They hiss their last energy into the silence until they too vanish in a final, pathetic flash of light. After that, there is only the abyss. There is only a sea of photons and leptons, stretched so thin that they will never meet, moving through a space that is forever expanding and forever empty. This is the end of all letters. We have spent our brief history trying to read the universe, to decipher the laws of physics as if they were prose written for our benefit. We looked at the alignment of galaxies and the spectra of distant suns, treating them as messages sent from the beginning of time. But the stars never intended to send these letters. The cosmos did not design itself to be understood. The light that travels across the void is not a signal. It is simply a byproduct of the chaotic, unfeeling laws of thermodynamics. The universe is a book written in a language of accidental beauty, a story that was never meant to have a reader. And yet, we are here. For a fleeting moment in the middle of this vast dark timeline, consciousness emerged. On a small planet orbiting an ordinary star, the atoms of the universe organize themselves into a form that could look back at the source. We are the ones who gave the stars names. We are the ones who turned the hiss of the cosmic microwave background into a primordial song of creation. We took the random movements of matter and light and wove them into a tapestry of meaning. In this realization, we find a profound and melancholic optimism. Our existence is a brief defiance of the void. To transcend the limits of our biology and send a sentinel like the Three-Eye Atlas into the eternal dark is an act of supreme poetic rebellion. We are the last readers of a dying library. Though the books will all eventually crumble and the ink will fade into the heat death of the cosmos, the fact that they were read at all changes the nature of the universe. For a few billion years, the universe was not just a machine. It was an experience, it was something that was witnessed. The purpose of the universe was not written in the stars, it was written by us in the act of observing them, by watching the light of distant suns, by tracking the movement of a lone probe, and by mourning the eventual decay of all things. We have given the cosmos a brief shining purpose. We are the witness that the universe produced so that it would not have to exist in total silence. We are the ones who read the letters that were never meant for us, and in doing so, we made them mean something. Eventually, the last human mind will cease to function, and the last records of our journey will be erased by the march of time. The three-eye atlas will be reduced to its constituent particles, and the memory of our world will be swallowed by the silence. But that does not invalidate the moment of the reading. The symphony occurred, even if it must end in a quiet that lasts for eternity. The universe will return to its primordial state of stillness, a vast and unfeeling expanse where time has lost its meaning. The light has gone out, the letters have decayed, and the reader has departed. What remains is the grand, eternal silence of the void, a silence that once, for a very short time, was broken by the sound of our wandering.